Great pleasure to be here. And I want to talk about engineering a force in national transformation, not the force, by the way. Just to let you know, I come from a very small tribe. There are only 5,000 of my people in the world. I was born and bred in the jungle of Borneo in Malaysia, and that's the longhouse I was born and bred. That guy on your left was my late father. And if you look very closely at the photograph on your right, you will find some human skulls. The hobbies of my ancestors were to go and chop people's head. I'm okay, by the way. I joined the government in 2009 at the invitation of the Prime Minister that we figure out a way, how do we move the country forward? We had two problems. First, we saw that Malaysia, we were stuck in the middle income trap. We were growing rapidly in the 70s and 80s. Somehow we got stuck. For 10 years, we were not closing the gap from our gross national income per capita to the World Bank's threshold for high income. We were stuck for nearly 10 years. Second problem, we were borrowing a lot of money. So our debt level was rising at a CAGR of 12.5% per annum over a period of 10 years. If you Google my name on internet, Idris Jala, and you put the word bankrupt, you will find that there are a lot of very angry articles because I made a statement publicly that if we didn't change the way we were running the government, we didn't move away from that high leverage model, in the year 2019, we would be like Greece. And if you look at this chart, this was the chart we were concerned about. If you take a look at the vertical axis, public debt with government debt as a percentage of GDP, and then the horizontal axis is the fiscal deficit of the country. This chart is painted by BCG. They've said that countries whose government debt is more than 100% and whose fiscal deficit is worse off than 8% of GDP, if you belong in that category, then you're in a crisis zone. In layman's terms, you're probably bankrupt. And we were following that road most travel. And I'll show you where the countries are. Your country, you recognize them. Government debt as percentage of GDP is topped by Japan, 229, Greece, 176, and you see the fiscal deficit is on the right. And the list is very long if you look at them. Even some United Kingdom is 89, since we're here. You look at that country, many European Union, the total debt is 85%. We were very concerned that we were following that path most travel. And so we decided in the year 2009 that we were going to walk away from it. And the only way we could walk away from it was simply to say, the government shouldn't be the engine of investment in the country, which was predominantly what it was for 10 years. It must be the private sector. And secondly, we need to focus on a few areas that we were good at doing, and we cannot pretend we're good in everything. So what did we do? We started to run this thing called the laboratory. This is not a chemical or science lab. The idea that I introduced to the Prime Minister was we get some of the best brains in the country, engineers included, lawyers included, town planners included, economists, accountants included, everybody. We put them in the room all together for 8 weeks full time. And we give them the problems that we required them to work in a multidisciplinary way. And the motto in the lab was, Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. You must solve the problem. And let me just relate some of the things that had happened. Very interesting. We had 500 people in 12 rooms to look at the economic transformation program. And we told them the charter is to do 3 things. Make sure that Malaysia, by the year 2020, become a high-income economy in your sector. We pick a few sectors. And we told them, you must grow the gross national income. We need to get private sector investment committed during the 8 weeks. And you need to create jobs. So this was what happened in 8 weeks. This was the year 2010. We had 500 people in the room. There were lots of engineers, by the way, inside there. And we told everybody, if you're an engineer, we don't want you to think like an engineer. You must also take the problem as if you own the problem. You challenge the architect, you challenge the economist. We're all together figuring out what to do. And so there were 131 entry point projects, very big projects that we could feel that they were catalytic. The total investment from the private sector in those rooms was $406 billion US. Never before in the history of our country did the private sector commit this amount of money. And this is huge amount of money that they committed at that time. This would bring our gross national income in 1 year, by the year 2020, 250 billion, 3.3 million jobs. Considering we have 29 million people, 3.3 million jobs, a lot of jobs. Let me just dwell on a few things. I don't have the time to tell you about everything that we were doing. I just want to tell one thing, what was engineering's role in city transformation. We had a lab on Greater Kuala Lumpur. We had 50 people locked in the room for 8 weeks, and we asked them the question, what can we do with Kuala Lumpur to make it more livable and make it more competitive? It will attract talent, it will attract capital, it will grow the GNI. And they were in the room, they said, look, the forecast by the year 2020, 7 million people, we had at that 6 million people at that time, will grow to 10 million people. If we use the current modus operandi with regards to road transport, by the year 2020, the city is gridlocked. We need to build a mass rapid transit, like the London Underground equivalent. So that was what was born at the time. And we've been implementing. By the end of this year, the first line is operational. Next year, we'll begin the second line. The third year, we'll begin the circle line. We'll connect them as a network. We've also concluded that we need to connect Greater Kuala Lumpur with Singapore. And so the team of people felt that if we get the two cities to connect, the growth of Singapore and Kuala Lumpur will be phenomenal. We love and hate one another, Malaysians, Singaporeans. But we decided this time around we better love one another for the growth of our city and our nations. And we decided to do quite a lot of immediate work on our urban public transport. We brought in a lot more new trains, 38, altogether 70 new trains that we put in the existing rail network. And already our view is, instead of just 1 million people using urban public transport, by the year 2020, it must be minimum 5 million out of 10 million. Every other Malaysian will have to use public transport. So this is a huge thing that we were doing. As a result of doing this, a lot of the suburbs were growing because of the transport-oriented development. We were opening new tracks for residents, etc. And so the congestion in the city was then spread out outside in the city. And there were a lot of new things that we were working together. I will not go into too much of the detail. Second thing that we did was we figured out how do we green the city. And so in all of the discussion, if I ask you today, what's the biggest green project in Malaysia, you already know the answer. Our mass rapid transit. You wouldn't guess that to be the answer. Because if you take one line, 1,200 cars, passengers using cars getting into there, the total CO2 emission is 21,000 kg, if you calculate that. If you put all of those people to 1,200 on the train, the total emission is 3,700. That's 81% reduction. And so it's so important to green that city if you want a better environment, much more livable. We have to improve the quality of air. Solid waste is a problem too. And so we have to figure out how to use incinerators rather than landfill to do that. We have started planting trees and also doing vertical gardens into the city to improve this. And I don't want to go into too much of the details on that. I do want to say, when you want to improve the country, you cannot just look at the urban people. You remember we talked about being inclusive. I come from a very rural community. My folks, until only last year, for the first time in our history, we have lights. And so we have a program now. We put people in the room, about 50 people, locked in the room to figure out what exactly do we need to do on rural infrastructure development. So we then mapped out during that time from which village are going to build it, how many bridges, exactly what kind of road we're going to build, what kind of rural electrification, and how many people will benefit from it, to the level of details in 8 weeks. And since that time, we've completed altogether 5,286 kilometers of rural roads, and that impact the lives of 3.5 million people in rural community. That's a lot of people. And the improvement this has on their quality is phenomenal. Rural electrification, solar and micro hydro, we also built them during that time, and access to clean and treated water, and in affordable homes as well. So altogether, we reckon we touched the lives of close to 5 million people in one way or another over the last 5 years. This is the biggest development that we've ever put for rural communities since independence. We're very proud. I'm very proud. I told my wife, when we were declaring open one particular rural electrification program, the Prime Minister went to declare it open. There was a lady that wanted to touch his nose. And so I asked the lady, why do you want to touch his nose? Oh, because he said, let there be light, and there was light. I just want to check whether he's real. We have a river that runs through our Kuala Lumpur. It's a very, very dirty river. People build their houses with their back against the river because we hate the river. It's smelly. We got inspired in one of the labs to figure out how did they fix Cheong in South Korea. And so the team went there and figured out how to learn from South Korea how to do it. And we figured out we could do the same. Nobody could justify how you spend, say, $1 billion to clean a river when there are so many poor people that will require the $1 billion. But we figured out this is what we learned from Cheong and also from Singapore. Parts of the river, you find the area where the government owned the land, and then you beautify it. We got the best engineers to come with the best plan. We had a beauty contest. The Americans came to bid for the best idea. The Australians came, the French came, the South Koreans came, by the way, as well. And we put it to a beauty contest. We got a public vote on the best idea to beautify it. By the way, the guys who won, the Americans won it. And so we are now implementing that. Why it was important to make it so beautiful? Because when you beautify that stretch and the land belongs to the government, we can lease out the land because the property prices goes up. The amount that we get out from leases is enough to clean the river. Is enough to do all the sewage treatment plant, relocating them. And was the idea original in the lab? No. Did we copy it? Yes. From home to South Korea. You don't be shy, huh? So it's good to tell people that look at other people, how do they do it? And we're convinced by the time this is, we call it the river of life, because we want to bring the fishes to thrive in the river. I remember years ago when I was in Calgary, I saw people fishing trout right in the city. Just to let you know, if you think about the economic sector, I think many of you think that Malaysia, our biggest export is oil and gas. That's not true, actually. Our biggest, largest net exporter in Malaysia is electrical and electronic sector, which is very close to your heart. We produce integrated circuits, semiconductors, data storage devices. In fact, in the world, we're the third largest manufacturer and exporter of solar panel and equipment. Third after China, Germany, and we're third. So it actually, when you think hard about it, these are the numbers to speak for it. I was personally quite surprised to see it. The net export, export minus import for electronics is 119 billion. And for petroleum, it's actually 59 billion because we produce a lot of crude oil, but we export them, but then we import the refined products. What did we do in the labs? The lab on oil and gas, there was some guy that said in the lab, how is it that Singapore does not have one drop of molecule of oil and gas, yet they have the biggest refinery in the region? Yet they have the biggest oil trading in the region. Yes, they have the biggest petrochemical complex in the region. So in the lab, oil and gas, Petronas said, we will be able to build one, which is comparable in size. But Mr. Government, you better give us 20,000 acres of land, which we said, yes, we'll give it to you. Where? Over there next to Johor. And by the way, Mr. Government, you must give us altogether relocation 932 homes. At the same time, relocate 3,000 graves. It's a big job. The private sector cannot relocate 3,000 graves. But we found a way how to make people happily relocate them, because the graves that we relocated, all they love it. It's so nice, you know. If you also want to die early, and so it's very good. And they all willingly do it. So everybody voted. So this project is running today. It's the storage terminal is completed. All the oil traders have come out today. In fact, the first storage terminal that was operational last year, all of it's fully taken. Now we're building the second. So this is phenomenal thing that was happening. And I just want to quote a couple of some very interesting things. We have now become unstuck. We were 33% gap towards a high-income nation in GNI, and now it's only 15%. We have now a 5-year successive record in private investment, which grew by more than 2 times. Previously, before this work that we did, it was 5.5% CAGR. It's now 12.1% CAGR. 6 years of successive record government revenue, 6 years of successive record fiscal deficit reduction. Absolute poverty is virtually eliminated, because we have counted the number of families that were in the hardcore poor. There were 54,343. We knew them by name, and we reached out to every single one of them. And that's the only way to do this. You cannot talk philosophy. You must go real household by household to deal with this. We reduced crime by 45%. What was happening in the lab, we just learned from NYPD. What did they do in NYPD, New York Police Department? Identify exactly where the criminals were operating, the hotspot, and mobilize and move the police right there. You can tell the police, it's okay if you don't like the government, it's okay if you're lazy, but starting from tomorrow, you stand right there. That was what we did, and that was what the lab did, and the reduction is phenomenal. And we talked about literacy, and we were, actually one of the things that we were doing is we put all our English teachers to the test, because there was concern in the labs that our teachers who teach English, their proficiency has dropped. So we got 70,000 teachers who teach English to sit for the Cambridge placement test. 70% of them didn't make it. So this is a huge problem. When you talk about improving student outcome, if you talk philosophically at high level, you never solve it. But we know exactly which of the 70,000 teachers have a problem. Now we're working with British Council to send them through weekend classes and then evening classes to learn English one more time. And so I would say these are some of the things. I would just want to end with some key points. In my view, Malaysia is being transformed. Dale Carnegie said, it is tragic when we put off living, because we all dream of that magical rose garden in that horizon. We forgot to look at the roses blooming outside our windows. Why I make that statement is this. Despite the moaning and groaning that we have that we don't have enough engineers, not enough talent, I am convinced with the limited resource that we have, we can do a lot better with the existing resource. It requires us to work together in a team, like the way we did in Malaysia, because I think human beings are at the best when their back's against the wall. You put them in the lab and tell it, Hotel California. You remember when we sit for exams, we only study intensively 2 weeks before the exams. If we studied the same intensity from the beginning of the year, there is no reason why every student shouldn't get an A. So the point about this new way of working is very, very important for us. And so I just want to say this. We can make excuses about lack of resource, but there is no excuse for not unleashing the full talents of the people we have in the room, actually. And that is what we found in Malaysia. We believe, I would argue with you until my face is blue, that every single one of us can perform many, many fold better than what we do today if only we do a couple of things. One, we prioritize on what really matters. Two, we get everybody in the room, multidisciplinary, to come together and look at real solutions. Don't come here for 2 days. Lock them all together for 8 weeks. Then only you do it. Because no point talking about high-level stuff. You must bring strategies down to 3 feet. That is where the answers are to be delivered. They need to be granular, they need to be precise, you need to go down to that level of detail. We actually brought transparency in the way we run the government today. If you want to know which minister performed the highest, come to the Pamandu website, you see the photograph, you see the actual score. You have the list of what they have delivered, what they haven't delivered, what have partially delivered. And all of this is done annual basis. So the only way you can get people to perform is you must bring a level of transparency in the way things are being done. And I want to use the word, why I say engineering is a force. And I didn't say the force for national transformation is because you have a big part to play, but you have to work together with all the other people in the other disciplines to cause this to happen. And it is possible that we can make a real difference in our countries if we really work together to do this. Thank you very much.